Shalom. Thanks for joining me. Um, Matthew chapter 4 is where we're at. I'm in the third section of Matthew chapter 4. It starts in verse 18. This is the part about Jesus calling his very first disciples. I'm in the New International Version. Join me now as we do this. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come, follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." At once, they left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. This is a fascinating little section in here about Jesus calling his first disciples formally. If you read through the Gospel of John, you discover that Jesus had called Andrew and Peter and some others early on. But now that is not talked about in the Gospel of Matthew. And so where Jesus had called them originally was way down by where John was baptizing, down near what is called Bethany. And they followed him for a little while, but then now about almost a year has passed since Jesus was baptized. And now he's up at Capernaum walking by the Sea of Galilee, and this is where Andrew and Simon lived. This is where James and John lived. Apparently they may have been fishing partners, we're not sure. But it's fascinating that now when he calls them, they immediately drop everything and follow him instantly without any hesitation whatsoever. Now that's a fascinating thing. I had to do a little digging, a little research to find out something about this, but rabbis in that day and time would have students follow them around. And someone who was following a rabbi like that, in Hebrew, they were called a taladim. A taladim meant that this was like an apprentice. This is a person that's following their rabbi around so that they can become like their rabbi. And so here is Jesus, an itinerant rabbi. And, the minute you get called to follow a rabbi, that means the rabbi has been paying attention to all kinds of people, and he is picking only the best of the best to follow him and become his taladim, become his apprentices. What we would call in English a disciple. Disciple doesn't quite carry the same meaning as a taladim, because a taladim is really more the idea of an apprentice. And so here is Simon and Andrew, here is James and John, and now this itinerant rabbi Jesus has come up and has handpicked them to be his taladim, to be his apprentices, and to follow him, to become like him. And they don't hesitate for 1 minute to do that. All Jewish boys would go through synagogue school. They would learn how to read and write. They were very literate. Most Israelis, and during that time, were quite literate. They memorized large portions of the scripture. Every little Jewish boy memorized the whole book of Leviticus, for instance. That was usually one of the ones they had to know by heart, and know it, quoting it from memory. That's probably not our highest form of devotional literature for us as Christians today in the 21st century, but you got to stop and think. If you were a first century Jew, the book of Leviticus is the nuts and the bolts. This is how you put it together to worship God. This is how you follow God. These are the laws of everyday life, everyday living. And so that's an important book to know. So here is Jesus calling his very first taladim, his very first apprentices. And they don't hesitate for 1 minute to leave everything. They have the highest priority in their life is to become like their rabbi. And there isn't any other thing in life more important. And you see this when they leave their nets, when James and John leave their father.